Tonight on PrimeTime, the US military has carried out a lethal strike on a vessel in the Eastern Pacific, killing 4 people. Alongside President Trump's pressure on Venezuela, it's action that has unsettled energy markets and is raising fresh questions about security and economic stability. US action overseas, strong and unsettling. Good evening. The US military has carried out a lethal strike on a vessel in the Eastern Pacific, killing 4 people. The Pentagon said the vessel was operating along a known drug smuggling route, and the strike comes amid heightened US pressure on Venezuela, with the Trump administration accusing President Nicolas Maduro's government of links to narcotics trafficking, claims Maduro denies. Well, the US president has taken a firm line on Venezuela, showing no signs of backing down from his decision to block sanctioned oil tankers. The move has unsettled energy markets and helped push global oil prices higher.
The international oil prices surged on Wednesday after US President Donald Trump ordered a blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers entering and leaving Venezuela. The West Texas Intermediate for January delivery increased 1.21% to settle at $55.94 a barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange. Brent crude for February delivery went up 1.29% to settle at $59.68 a barrel on the London ICE Futures Exchange. The move also sparked political reaction inside Venezuela. Supporters of President Nicolas Maduro gathered in Caracas to protest the US oil blockade, accusing Washington of economic aggression. Speaking to reporters, US President Donald Trump defended the decision, saying Washington was seeking to reclaim lost energy interests.
Getting land, oil rights, whatever we had, they took it away because we had a president that maybe wasn't watching. But they're not going to do that. We want it back. They took our oil rights. We had a lot of oil there. As you know, they threw our companies out, and we want it back.
In response, Maduro insisted Venezuela would continue trading its oil and rejected US claims over the country's resources, even as most exports remained on hold.
Trade in and out will continue. Our oil and all our natural wealth that by the Constitution and Bolivar's legacy belongs, our wealth, our land, and our oil, to its only legitimate owner, which for centuries and centuries has been our sovereign people of Venezuela, the absolute owner of the land, subsoil, and all its wealth.
The diplomatic fallout is widening. The United Nations chief has spoken with the Venezuelan president, and Maduro has requested an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss what it describes as ongoing US aggression.
Well, my guest to discuss this tonight is Ivani Vasola, professor at the State University of New York. Professor, thank you very much indeed for joining us on PrimeTime. Can I start by asking you about this latest strike? What do we actually know? What details do we know about why this particular vessel was targeted?
There is not much information, as it has been the case with other attacks on boats, both in Atlantic waters in the Caribbean region, as in the Pacific waters near Colombia. The administration has not provided much information about all these attacks that have been occurring since September and already claimed the lives of about 100 civilians. Originally, the claim was that U.S. was trying to intercept and eliminate drug traffickers. And apparently this latest one, this was not the explanation, but the fact is that there is not much explanation about this type of military action in waters in South America.
Yeah, it's becoming the new norm, isn't it? It seems. Just going specifically back to Venezuela, every time we hear criticism of the US actions or rhetoric linking Venezuela and President Maduro to narcotics trafficking, we always hear this defense, which is along the lines of, well, all the intelligence agencies agree that, of course, that's what's going on. But the problem is we as members of the public don't have access to that intelligence. So we just kind of have to take the word of the politicians. What credible, accessible evidence is there linking Maduro to day-to-day drug trafficking?
So the point is precisely what you're saying. We don't have access to the information of, for example, the US intelligence about what is precisely going on in Venezuela. Naturally, there is drug trafficking in Venezuela, as well as there is drug trafficking in other countries in South America. But to the point of declaring or accusing President Maduro of being the leader of a narco trafficking organization, there is no evidence for that.
And just moving to the markets now, there has been a bit of twitchiness on global energy markets. I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it? Not enough time has passed to point to any kind of sustainable trend. But what's your view on the relationship between the blockade and the health, the state, the confidence on the energy markets?
What we obviously know, and there are many people, politicians, society in general concerned, is with the potential for destabilization, considering the military presence in South America, in the international waters of South America, because this could really generate an instability in the entire region, particularly in relation to trade. For example, the seizure of oil tankers of Venezuela, or the so-called blockade of Venezuela that has been declared by the US government, is already disrupting maritime operations in the coast of Venezuela, preventing resources going in and going out of Venezuela because of this blockade, and obviously causing a great amount of concern inside Venezuelan neighbors, such as Colombia and Brazil. Oil prices, as we know, are going up, and this is of serious concern, not only in South America, but worldwide, particularly countries that are importers of Venezuelan oil, like China, that is an important customer of Venezuela. So the potential for destabilization, particularly economic destabilization, is huge. And also the issue of immigration in South America. Venezuelans are fleeing their country, crossing the border with Brazil and crossing the border with Venezuela. This is a very serious issue for the region.
Yeah, I was going to come on to, we've spoken about politicians, spoken about the markets, I was going to come on to talking about citizens with you. Obviously, President Maduro, we know what he thinks of the US action, and we can assume what his supporters think of it. What about regular citizens, perhaps those citizens that aren't strong supporters of President Maduro? What is their attitude towards what the US is doing?
Right. As you properly is stating, the Venezuelan society is divided, right? So there are groups pro-President Maduro and an important group, the so-called opposition, among them Maria Corina Machado, the woman that leads the Venezuelan opposition and won recently the Nobel Peace Prize for that. But according with the information that we are getting, even this strong opposition of Venezuela, they are against, for example, a military intervention in Venezuela, the intervention of the United States. Yes, the opposition would like to see the end of the Maduro government. They would like to see a replacement there, a new president, but not the intervention. Because this would cause enormous pain, enormous losses for Venezuela in terms of lives and in terms of the country's economy.
Finally, Professor, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we can see a trajectory of activity that President Trump is pushing. There have been various reactions. There have been some calls for an emergency Security Council meeting. What do you think happens next?
So even today, President Trump, or yesterday, in fact, has made some statements that the United States must regain control of U.S. assets that have been taken by Venezuela. And he was referring to several years of policies in Venezuela of confiscating assets of U.S. companies that were operating in Venezuela, particularly oil companies. So based on the statements of President Trump, obviously the United States is going to take some type of action to recover the assets, perhaps to promote regime change in Venezuela, to ousted President Maduro. But precisely when and what type of action is going to be, we don't know. Yes, it's time already for the UN Security Council to take some action in terms of a resolution that we never know if it's going to be approved or not, but Security Council, as you know, is very difficult to approve resolutions, but we are waiting for a United Nations response.
Do you think there's a difference here between the initial strike, which could perhaps have been tolerated, explained somehow in the international community, and then now this sense of strikes continuing in a kind of an ad hoc manner? Was there a sort of a different attitude taken to the initial action versus where we seem to be heading?
In relation to the action of society in general in the United States, we can see that there is more and more concern in relation to these attacks, to the killing of what could be drug traffickers. We don't know if they are or not, because the US administration that does not show evidence, does not reveal the names, so we don't know. But there is concern, there is a great deal of concern in the US Congress, even among Republicans that belong to the same party of President Trump. So I would say that there is growing concern with the attacks.
Professor, we thank you very much indeed for your analysis, for joining us from New York. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, after the break, we'll be taking a look at the latest business stories with Katie Wilson. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Prime Time. Now, Katie Wilson is here with the very latest business news. Katie, what's on the agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, there's more tension between Washington and Brussels over tech. Stocks are down across the board on Wall Street, and some new inclusive smart glasses may change the way we communicate. Let's get started. First this evening, a new transatlantic spat is brewing. Washington is warning it could slap fees or limits on European service firms, accusing the EU of targeting US companies unfairly. It's the latest flashpoint as Brussels presses ahead with its tougher crackdown on big tech.
President Donald Trump's administration on Tuesday threatened to impose fees or restrictions on European service providers. That's in response to what it called discriminatory actions against US firms. Washington accused the EU and member states of, quote, discriminatory and harassing lawsuits, taxes, fines and directives against US service providers. It argued that EU companies like Spotify and Accenture, quote, operate freely in the US. In a post on X, the US Trade Representative Office suggested it would have no choice but to begin using every tool at its disposal to counter these unreasonable measures. It suggested fees or restrictions could be among the actions taken, also pointing to companies like Amadeus and SAP. This threat comes as Europe forges ahead with a crackdown on big tech. Regulators imposed a $140 million fine on Elon Musk's X in December. That's just months after hitting Google with an unexpectedly high $3.44 billion charge. Washington has taken aim against the EU's digital legislation and has ordered diplomats to launch a lobbying blitz against the laws. The European Commission pushed back against the USTR's accusations, saying its rules apply equally and fairly to all companies operating in the EU.
Meanwhile, over in the US, Wall Street hit the brakes. Stocks slid across the board, with tech leading the drop as fresh jitters crept into the AI trade. From Oracle to Nvidia, worries about mounting debt and costly AI build-outs sent the S&P 500 and Nasdaq down to 3-week lows.
Wall Street's main indexes closed lower on Wednesday, with the Dow dropping nearly 0.5%, the S&P 500 shedding more than 1%, and the Nasdaq losing 1.8%. Shares of Oracle dropped nearly 5.5% after a report said the company's largest data center partner, Blue Owl Capital, will not back a $10 billion deal for its next AI-related facility. Adam Coons is Chief Investment Officer at Winthrop Capital Management.
In particular, today, the story is around Oracle, the continued build out, and then the fact that Blue Owl, who's been prevalent with some other deals with AI stories, actually did not participate in Oracle's equity offering surrounding their build out of their data center up in Michigan. So that market's just a little bit, worried about, kind of the growing angst around growing debt to fund all of this AI infrastructure build.
Worries about the technology sector taking on more debt to develop AI have discouraged risk-taking lately. Shares of AI bellwether Nvidia fell nearly 4% on Wednesday, and fellow chipmaker Broadcom dropped 4.5%. Shares of Amazon also closed lower after reports said the company is in talks to invest about $10 billion in ChatGPT maker OpenAI. On the flip side, shares of Micron Technology rose as much as 14% in extended trading before paring some of those gains after the company forecast second quarter profit well above Wall Street estimates, buoyed by soaring prices for memory chips and booming demand from AI data centers.
Well, let's get more detail on the troubles facing Oracle. Shares tumbled after a key data center partner pulled out of funding a $10 billion AI facility, sharpening investor worries about rising debt and the mounting cost of Oracle's big bet on artificial intelligence.
Shares of Oracle fell as much as 6% Wednesday morning after a key financial partner said it will not help fund a major AI data center. That's according to a source who told Reuters that talks broke down between Blue Owl Capital and Oracle, which plans to build a $10 billion data center in Saline Township, Michigan. That data center is intended to serve OpenAI. Oracle jumped into the AI race when it inked a massive deal with OpenAI months ago, to provide computing power to the ChatGPT parent. But that deal has proved costly for Oracle, which has had to borrow heavily to build out its AI infrastructure, its rising debt alarming investors. Oracle also denied a media report last week that it was delaying OpenAI-related data centers due to labor and material shortages. A key issue for Blue Owl, according to the source, is that it viewed the existing leases for the Michigan project as less favorable than those it had helped structure in its other deals with Oracle. Blue Owl has served as Oracle's primary backer for its largest data center projects in the U.S., investing its own money and raising billions of dollars more in debt, according to the Financial Times, which first reported the development. Oracle shares have fallen more than 15% since it reported quarterly earnings last week, as its massive spending and weak forecasts raised doubts over how quickly big bets on AI will pay off. Oracle did not immediately respond to a request for comment.
Over to the oil industry now, and BP is making a bold reset at the top. The oil major has tapped Meg O'Neill as its next CEO, looking to revive profits and sharpen its focus on oil and gas after years of lagging rivals and a costly detour into renewables.
BP has appointed Meg O'Neill as its CEO following the sudden exit of Murray Auchincloss. O'Neill used to work for Australia's Woodside Energy. She's the first CEO in over a century to be brought in from outside the British oil major. The switch of the top job for the second time in as many years is part of BP's efforts to boost profits, and comes after years of shares and earnings lagging behind competitors like ExxonMobil and Shell. BP pursued a major strategy shift earlier this year, slashing billions in renewable energy plans and refocusing on oil and gas. It's pledged to divest $20 billion in assets by 2027 and reduce debt and costs. That's as the oil major's chair, Albert Manifold, called for transformative changes, emphasising the need for a portfolio reshape for profitability. He faced pressure from activist investors who called for an urgent address of what they saw as the company's shortcomings. O'Neill's position will become effective in April and was described by analysts as a high-profile hire. BP's Executive Vice President, Carol Howell, will serve as interim CEO until O'Neill takes charge.
Let's catch up on crypto this week, from Terra USD creator Do Kwon getting 15 years for what a judge called epic fraud, to Juventus turning down a $1.2 billion Tether takeover bid. It's been a whirlwind of courtroom drama, big money moves and regulatory shake-ups.
From an epic fraud to an Italian soccer giant rejecting Tether, this is Crypto Weekly. The creator of Terra USD was sentenced to 15 years in prison for what a judge called epic fraud. South Korea's Do Kwon was the crypto entrepreneur behind the Terra USD and Luna tokens that lost an estimated $40 billion in 2022. The US judge who sentenced Kwon said he'd repeatedly lied to everyday investors who trusted him with their life savings. The 34-year-old Kwon admitted he misled investors over Terra USD, a so-called stablecoin meant to stay at $1 in value. Italian soccer giant Juventus turned down a takeover bid from crypto group Tether. The bid valued the country's most successful soccer club at just over $1.2 billion. The Agnelli family's holding company Exor said it had no intention of selling any of its shares in the Turin-based club. Tether is headquartered in El Salvador and run by Italian Paolo Ardoino, who is a Juventus supporter. Coinbase hired former British Finance Minister George Osborne to run its internal advisory council. The crypto exchange wants to grow its influence with governments beyond the US, including the UK and EU. Coinbase has become a major lobbying force in the US in recent years. The update came in the same week OpenAI also announced it had hired Osborne to help its overseas data center expansion. Britain's finance ministry said it will start regulating crypto assets from October 2027. It said it hopes to give the industry certainty while keeping out criminals. The new law will extend existing financial regulation to companies involved in crypto. The move aligns Britain with the US rather than the EU, which has built rules tailored to the industry. And crypto giants including Ripple and Circle received preliminary approval to establish national trust banks. The decision came from a top US banking regulator who still needs to give final permission. The move could further integrate digital assets into the banking system if it goes ahead. The National Trust Bank charters would allow the companies to manage and hold assets on behalf of customers and settle payments faster. But the licence doesn't allow the companies to take cash deposits or make loans.
And finally, a breakthrough that could change the way deaf and hard of hearing people experience the world. Smart glasses put real-time captions right in front of your eyes, using AI and augmented reality to make conversations clearer, easier and more inclusive, whether you're at home or in a crowd.
Go for it.
Trying on a pair of smart glasses at a presentation in London, Yvonne Cobb, who is deaf, is seeing subtitles right in front of her eyes. X-Ray Glass says their technology is poised to transform accessibility for the deaf and hard of hearing community, delivering real-time AI-generated captions directly within the user's field of vision. Jack Bloomfield is the head of marketing at X-Ray Glass.
So for those who are deaf, hard of hearing, or perhaps struggle to engage with the conversations around them, they can simply put on a pair of smart glasses and immediately see the words being said around them.
He says the company's founder, Dan Scarf, was inspired by his grandfather's hearing challenges.
So despite owning some of the world's best hearing aids, he was still struggling to engage with the conversations around him. It wasn't until that evening that he put captions on the TV and everyone saw that he was instantly engaged, and that's very much where the light bulb moment came from.
Peter Coughlin wears a hearing aid for his hearing impairment and agrees the technology could help him in a crowd.
I was very pleasantly surprised, basically, because I can imagine that in the rugby club where there's a crowd around, I'm going to be able to concentrate on the person who's speaking and see clearly what he's saying, provided he doesn't speak ridiculously fast.
The latest version of the glasses incorporates artificial intelligence and augmented reality, as well as automatic language recognition and real-time translation of 300 languages. The glasses retail for 699 British pounds, or about $935 US.
That's your business news roundup for the day. Back to you, Guy.
Katie, I've got two question marks about these glasses. Firstly, their price point is about the same as I paid for my first ever car, so quite a lot of money. Secondly, for those of us who are just a fraction over 30 and need glasses to go about our business, how do they incorporate that as well as all the tech?
It's a good point. I think I kept thinking about what it would be like to have subtitles just as you live your life. I struggle watching a movie with subtitles, so I don't know how I would feel about having them as I go about my day.
Very strange, life changing very quickly. Katie, thanks as always. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the EU summit where Russian frozen assets for Ukraine are on the top agenda. Do stay with us. Welcome back, you're watching PrimeTime. European Union leaders are meeting in Brussels for a two-day summit to try and agree on how to lend billions of euros of desperately needed cash to Ukraine. Now, the European Commission has proposed using frozen Russian central bank assets, most of which are held in a Belgian clearinghouse to secure a large loan for Kyiv. However, Belgium has raised concerns that the plan may not be legally watertight, while other member states have also expressed reservations. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has warned of the risks of failing to reach an agreement and has urged Europe to rise to the occasion.
Either money today or blood tomorrow. And I am not talking about Ukraine only, I am talking about Europe. And this is our decision to make, and only ours. I think all European leaders have to finally rise to this occasion. And this is all what I can say today. Now.
Well, shortly after meeting EU leaders, Ukrainian President Zelensky talked about US President Donald Trump's influence to bring the war to Ukraine to an end.
Look, it's not simple dialogue, really. I mean, we are in the war in the United States, you know. They the decision makers who can really stop Putin. And I count on this. But I really count on pressure from the United States. Now United States more mediating, it's true they're mediating between us. But I really wanted very much them more steps pressuring Russia, because I think that Putin doesn't want to stop this war, but he can if United States will pressure more. And President Trump, he can, I think so, and God bless, he will be successful in this. Yes, but we will continue next year.
Well, joining me now to discuss this further is A News' Andy Mioch. Andy, very good to see you as always. EU leaders sometimes get criticised for all talk, no action. So what are the concrete things they're aiming to achieve out of this summit, Andy?
Well, it's been quite a busy day, and it was mostly talk. Of course, the issue of financing Ukraine over the next 2 years was pushed later into the agenda, allowing for technical teams to sort out those draft conclusions, to make to find some solutions and reduce any potential clashes that may be. European leaders have, as we've heard just now, met with Volodymyr Zelensky. After that, they held their discussions on EU enlargement, and going into working lunch, they spoke on the awaited 7-year EU budget due to be finalized in 2027. So as of yet, we have no official word on Europeans talking amongst themselves on the Ukraine financing, but there are some drafts floating about, but nothing official. However, how things stand, the situation is quite clear. Ukraine is running out of money and will be out of money in the second quarter of next year. Zelensky was speaking to reporters following this meeting, and besides Trump, he also spoke on the EU leaders agreeing to finance Ukraine somehow. He, in essence, said it doesn't matter how, as long as that help does indeed come along. He said he wouldn't speculate on the decision that leaders would make today or any other day, but when asked when does Ukraine need this decision to be taken, he said until the end of this year, which is basically less than 2 weeks if we take into account the holidays. Coming into the summit, European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said this morning that leaders must reach an agreement today, as they had already committed back in October at a summit that they will provide Ukraine with funding. The commission that she heads has 2 proposals on how to make that happen, either through the profits of the Russian frozen assets or financing Ukraine with joint EU debt. Now, both of these options have had some pushback from some of these member states. We'll get into these details shortly, but the sentiment that the deal needs to be closed today was also echoed by the European Council President Antonio Costa, who said the summit will not end until a deal is reached.
It's interesting. It's a real moral maze, this one, isn't it? Because we know that the assets themselves are conveniently next door, also in Belgium, although they belong to Russia, not to the EU leaders. The EU leaders now are trying to see if there's a way that they can be used to benefit the enemy of the country that they belong to. Now, whatever you think of Russia, that's a dangerous road to go down, isn't it? I mean, you know, sort of students of philosophy and history might tell you that that's the road to tyranny, when you believe you're absolutely right and everyone agrees that this person, this country is bad, so therefore it's okay for you to break a few rules. It's a risky business, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but if you ask Ukraine's Zelensky, he would say, and he did say, that it is a just thing to do. Plainly, as you've put it, the Europeans want to borrow this frozen Russian cash in order to lend Ukraine money, and that could be repaid by Kiev only after Russia pays for war reparations. These funds come from Russia's central bank, and EU froze these assets in 2022 as part of the sanctions on Moscow because of its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The bloc has been using the interest that was accruing from these assets in the past to help Ukraine, but this proposal takes things a lot further, and an obstacle the European Union cleared in order to be able to even think about this solution. That was last Friday, when they indefinitely immobilized Russian assets, as opposed to the earlier freezes that had to be renewed every 6 months. Now, as you've mentioned, the lion's share of these profits is in Belgium, in a securities depository called Euroclear, and Belgium has opposed this plan. Well, at least so far.
Yeah, just tell us more about the concerns, Andy. Not just the sort of the economic concerns, but also the political concerns that have been raised.
Belgium has been raising this issue for months now, ever since the idea came to be. Not only because of its legality, but also countermeasures that Russia could deploy on assets belonging to European countries or European institutions in Russia. And now, European leaders, in order to use all these funds, they need to convince Belgium to provide them with guarantees that they will not be left alone if Russia successfully sues in front of international courts. Commission is trying to get these member states on board as we speak. Some other countries, such as Italy and Czechia, have also voiced concerns over the plan, with Czechia's Andrej Babiš, the new prime minister, saying Prague will not agree to provide financial guarantees as it needs to reserve its money for Czech citizens. Russia, for its part, already filed a lawsuit seeking billions in damages from Euroclear, saying it is a preemptive measure against the plan of the European Commission to transfer the assets to third parties. That's according to their state news agency TASS. Interfax has reported that a preliminary hearing in the case is set for January 16th before a Moscow court. Now, given that it's a Russian court, how much will the Europeans care about that hearing is another thing. One important note here: not all of the frozen cash would be provided to Ukraine. The plan is to lend Kiev 90 billion euros over the next 2 years that will be used for its both civilian and military budget, and that would cover about 2/3 of what the International Monetary Fund assessed Kiev needs. The reparations loan would not need a unanimous approval, but a qualified majority. That means that more than half of EU states would need to vote in favor, representing at least 65% of the bloc's population. The other option, however, the one with joint EU debt, is one that would need unanimous support and seems less likely, as countries such as Hungary, known for its relations with Moscow, would need to sign off on it.
Now, we saw, Andy, Prime Minister Tusk in the package urging everyone to hurry up and get to a decision. You could see the tension on his face. If they're not able to either reach a complete agreement or a partial agreement, what are the implications then?
Well, he does have significant experience there in those Brussels hallways, yes. And that soundbite we've heard maybe illustrates the picture the best: either money today or blood tomorrow. And he did not limit that to Ukraine, but to Europe in general. Now, as we've said in the start, Europe promised to fund Ukraine, and Kyiv is running out of money. There are security fears, especially in the east of Europe, in Poland and in the Baltic states, on what happens if Ukraine runs out of money and loses this war outright. If you just look back at the past few months, if you remember in September, those drone incursions and those unidentified drones flying all over Europe, over military air bases in NATO airspace, that prompted the European leaders to agree to build a so-called drone wall. The incursions into Poland that Warsaw blamed on Moscow as well as its allies prompted NATO to announce the formation of the Eastern Sentry program, which aims to deter any further incursions. Some European officials have described that as Moscow testing the waters in other European countries and NATO countries, which are all allegations Kremlin rejects.
Very interesting as always. Andy, thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at Azerbaijan's shipment of petroleum to Armenia, a historic first in decades. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime. Azerbaijan shipped petroleum products by rail to Armenia today, marking the first such export in decades and a tangible breakthrough in efforts to normalize relations between the two countries. Our correspondent Aysel Ibramova has more.
Azerbaijan has begun supplying petroleum products to Armenia by rail for the first time in decades, in a development seen as an important step in improving relations between the two countries. The first shipment left on Thursday and includes 22 railway tank wagons carrying 1,220 tons of RON 95 gasoline. The fuel was produced by Azerbaijan's state-owned oil company, SOKAR. The delivery is being viewed as a clear sign that the peace process is moving beyond political statements and towards practical cooperation. The export follows an agreement reached on 28 November in Gabala during a meeting between Azerbaijan's Deputy Prime Minister Shahin Mustafayev and Armenia's Deputy Prime Minister Mer Grigoryan. Officials have described the shipment as an example of the economic benefits that can come from peace and a step towards building lasting trade ties. Experts say the move could help strengthen economic links in the South Caucasus, improve regional transport connections, and support wider trade and cooperation in the future.
Now, to discuss the potential outcomes of this historic oil shipment, I'm very happy to welcome our own Anastasia Lavrina into the studio. Anastasia, historic. What makes today's shipment particularly significant?
Well, I guess you know yourself, this is the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union when the direct communication between two countries are starting to begin its operation. Just recently, a month before, we spoke with you about the first cargo transition from through the territory of Azerbaijan, then Georgia, and through to Armenia, and two sides highlighted this as a historic moment for the future development of integration and cooperation. It was also highly appreciated by many European countries, United States, and so on. And this time we see that the first fuel shipment from Azerbaijan to Armenia in decades, effectively since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Well, we can say that energy trade resumed between two former wartime countries. It was a conflict, long conflict. There was occupation, and Armenia was somehow economically blockaded from two sides, from Azerbaijan and Turkey. And now, since the end of the war, and since especially the meeting held in Washington on August 8, two countries are trying to move from the words and agreements reached in the United States to the practical cooperation. And indeed, delivery by rail the energy sources, signaling a revival of practical regional connectivity. Azerbaijan is well known as a stable and reliable energy partner for many European countries. And as it was mentioned, yes, probably for the beginning the quantity is quite limited, but this is just the beginning, and it can really benefit the full region in terms of energy and economic cooperation between two countries in the South Caucasus.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the White House meeting there. I mean, it's very recent, that meeting, and as you say, turning words and handshakes and declarations into such practical action so quickly is quite incredible. Let's just talk about some of the facts and the figures. How much product has been shipped? How long is this going to go on for? Just give us a sense of what's really happening.
Well, the agreement was reached not only between Azerbaijan and Armenia, but also with Georgia. According to the decision made by the Prime Minister of this country, the first transit cargo will be absolutely for free, and then in the future they can negotiate the appropriate prices. And of course, Azerbaijan will cooperate with Armenia by selling the products in accordance with the standards officially appropriate for the international community and two countries. As it was mentioned in the beginning, the shipment consisted of around 1,220 metric tons of gasoline. For the beginning, this is not a big amount, but again, this is just the beginning. And the fuel was produced and supplied by SOCAR, state oil company of the Republic of Azerbaijan. And again, it marks the SOCAR's first direct commercial fuel delivery from Azerbaijan to Armenia. You absolutely rightly mentioned that the agreement reached between two countries just in August, 3 months before, and now we can see the practical way of cooperation. And I guess it will be a very good signal for the full international community, and especially for the opposition in Armenia, those who were blaming Azerbaijan for looking for its own benefits from the new geopolitical environment in the South Caucasus. But from the practical perspectives, we can see that all of those statements made by the President Ilham Aliyev within the time after the end of the war, that the collaboration between two countries will definitely benefit Armenia, Armenian society, Armenian economy and political landscape, and the full region itself. Now, from the real perspectives, we can see the practical outcome of that. The cooperation benefit not only Azerbaijan, but two countries also. And for Armenia, it's very important to have diversified energy policy. Until now, if I'm not mistaken, over 60% of its energy is reliance on cooperation with Russia. I'm not saying that Azerbaijan is going to completely remove Russia from the energy market of Armenia, but for this country, even small country, it's very important to have diversification of its energy policy. So Azerbaijan has a real perspective to join this on the practical level, and for the future to prove from the perspective of a reliable and stable partner, which will definitely have a practical contribution to the future peace process and building of confidence between two nations. Two leaders can speak a lot about the future perspectives, and now the international community and the societies can see the real outcomes of all of those negotiations and peace talks which took place before in Russia, then in Brussels, and later on in Washington, D.C., on how this cooperation and peace will benefit the full two societies in two countries. Yeah,
what do you think this says about the trajectory of the future relationship? I mean, some analysts are talking about normalization, but perhaps that's an inadequate statement. Perhaps this is about a new normal, about going further than the two countries have gone before.
Yes, indeed. This practical cooperation, remember how the European Union itself was formed. It all started from energy, then moved to economic platform, and then it had its own positive benefits for political cooperation. Two countries, if they are ready to sign the peace agreement, which is now on a practical level is taking place, and there are still some points which Armenia must have before two countries will be ready to sign it. Azerbaijan is demonstrating that from the practical perspectives, we already have its goodwill to support Armenian economy, and also contribute to the future peaceful coexistence. It's from the practical perspectives. And now we can see how Armenian society will react on that. From the official statement made by Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, he also highly appreciated the position, the stance of the Azerbaijani government, the willingness to cooperate, the willingness to remove all of those barriers. Then it means when there's a real time two countries ready to sign the peaceful agreement, it wouldn't be only the papers, it wouldn't be only the expectations from the future, but there will be the real practical experience two leaders can bring on the agenda at the table, saying that this is what we already achieved without having that paper signed by two countries. And this is what else we can do in the future. That will definitely have a unique aspects, how two countries started collaboration after so many years of disinformation, distrust, and also destructive policy of some Armenian policymakers, which destabilized the negotiation process before, and effectiveness of the Minsk Group OSCE within all of those years. Then the war, of course, which resulted in the win of Azerbaijani side, then resilience of Armenian society to understand this new reality. So it was a long process, and now within just some months we achieved such a great results. So I see here a real willingness of two leaders to proceed further with an intention to have that peace agreement on the paper also achieved in the near future, probably in the next year.
We all obviously saw the plenty of what happened in the White House. Very positive meeting, obviously. But give us a sense of the other steps and meetings that took place in order to get us to this historic point today.
Well, there were many meetings as well, not at the highest level, between the President Ilham Aliyev and Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. But for example, these, what we see today in the energy sphere, it's as the export follows an agreement which was reached on 28th November in Gabala during a meeting between Azerbaijan's Deputy Prime Minister Shahin Mustafayev and Armenia's Deputy Prime Minister Mir Grigoryan. They were, apart from this, other meetings where the sides spoke about the delimitation and demarcation, especially also the meetings held in Brussels. A lot of meetings held between the representatives of high-level officials, as we already mentioned, but I guess it's very important to mention the meeting held between the journalists and civil society representatives, which plays a significant role in the process of trust building between the societies. I guess you remember the first group of journalists and activists traveled from Azerbaijan to Armenia, and then we had a visit back from Armenia to Azerbaijan, and it was also highly appreciated by the participants. People who came here to Azerbaijan, I mean the experts, they mentioned that Azerbaijan, Baku itself, it's a very beautiful city, and they didn't face any discrimination or the bad attitude here. They were welcomed and they had a quite productive discussion at the round table. So I guess all of these together helping two countries to create this new environment, building trust and cooperation in all spheres at the same level. From the political perspectives, from the economic fields, I mean the cargo firstly delivered just recently. Now it's energy cooperation, cooperation between the journalists, let's say exchange between the representatives of the civil societies. The integration is happening from all aspects that of course and definitely benefit everyone, and somehow helps to remove all of those stereotypes which is being positioned and supported by the representatives of the opposition in Armenia, who are not willing to see the positive developments between two countries, or probably the representatives of the diaspora or Armenia lobby in some other countries who intervened a lot during the period of conflict and trying to destabilize the situation. They're sitting far away from the region and trying to comment and bring some negative aspects. But from the real perspectives, all of those who are involved in the process at the moment, and journalists, we are also doing our job making sure that all of those stereotypes are destroyed and the real and actual and true information is on the ground being delivered timely to everyone in the region and far beyond.
It's a really important point, isn't it? Because I think it shows what can happen quickly once you ignore the smoke and mirrors of the diaspora and actually just get to the two sides talking in a very direct way. Let's just take a look at the region, because the potential here if this can develop in the way that it looks like it's going to benefit not just Azerbaijan and Armenia, but the wider region? I mean, that's considerable, isn't it? The whole world at the moment seems to be looking at the South Caucasus and Central Asia because of the various ways it connects east to west. Just give us a sense of how this could benefit the region.
Well, Guy, I would like to memorize some things. I do remember even before the war how some experts were highly appreciated the potential of the region of the South Caucasus, how it could benefit many countries, not only here in the region, but far beyond. But because of the conflict, due to the conflict, it couldn't be developed in a proper way before. Definitely, Azerbaijan had a very strong energy development, energy projects with Europe, with Georgia, with Russia, Iran, and now later on with Central Asia. Middle corridor is on the agenda, but because of that conflict and disagreements between two sides, it also had some negative aspects. But now when the conflict is over, the war ended, and two countries are on the part to sign the peaceful agreement, just imagine what a huge potential it can bring to the countries in the region and far beyond. Starting from the middle corridor, as a part of which Zangezur corridor is also can be developed in the near future. And what we do see now from the energy and political and economic perspectives, all of these can be also transferred to the Zangezur corridor potential for the future. And now it's not only about Azerbaijan to transport its products to Armenia and then through Armenia to Nakhchivan, then to Turkey. It's also vice versa from Turkey through the territory to Armenia. The products can be delivered to Azerbaijan. Then Armenia can use the territory of Azerbaijan to deliver its goods to Iran. Russia from Azerbaijan, Georgia, then to Armenia. It's a huge potential which now has a real possibilities in near future to development from the economic, from the energy, from the political perspectives, meaning that the South Caucasus is becoming the only one stable, comparatively stable, and a real project to be supported by the global powers, by the international organization, by the United States. We do have the support of Donald Trump, who is willing to see the future development of, how he says, Trump's corridor or Zangezur corridor. This is a unique region as for now from its potential perspective for the future, for the real projects, which is no longer on the papers only, but have a real potential being used at the moment, and having the fully complete support of all member states who are involved and those who can benefit in near future.
Very encouraging times ahead. Anastasia, we thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll take a look at Israel's historic gas deal with Egypt. Do stay with us. Israel has approved what it says is its largest ever natural gas agreement. The country will export up to $35 billion of gas to Egypt from its Leviathan natural gas field, deepening energy ties at a time of regional uncertainty and tight supply. Speaking after approving the deal, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the contract matters for Israel's strategic and security interests.
This deal is with the American company Chevron, which has Israeli partners, and they will supply gas to Egypt. I approved the deal after securing our vital security and other interests, which I will not detail here. This deal greatly strengthens Israel's position as a regional energy power, and it contributes to stability in our region.
Okay, joining me now from Jerusalem is Maurice Hirsch of Jerusalem Centre for Security and Foreign Affairs. Maurice, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Prime Time. What makes this new gas agreement with Egypt then the largest in history?
So good evening to you and obviously to the audience. What makes this the largest deal is the fact that Israel discovered our natural gas resources only about 15 years ago, in 2008, 9, 10, in that area of time. We discovered this gas find in the Mediterranean Sea, and we've been developing it obviously for a while. It started production in late 2019, and now we've started selling off that gas because we have enough for our own domestic consumption, and we're able to sell off the gas reserves that we have now to other clients. We have existing agreements with Jordan, an existing small agreement, obviously, with Egypt. But now comes along this really huge deal, $35 billion worth of gas that will be sold to Egypt over the next 20 odd years. That's something which, in terms of Israel's economy, obviously, is something which is huge. This isn't one of these deals that you see, obviously, every day. It's something that, in considering the geopolitical context at the moment, the ceasefire, the end of the war, please God, with Gaza, it means that we're turning over a page from conflict to possible prosperity for the entire region.
Yeah, it's very interesting and very clearly a number that is going to have a material effect on the economy. And what about the impact? So we've heard discussion about the impact on Israel's strategic and security interests. How does the economic prosperity link with those two other elements?
Well, obviously, Israel's security is based on its financial stability. You can't really protect yourself if you're unable to ensure that your economy can function, that you can mass produce everything that you need for a functioning economy in peacetime, and all the more so, obviously, in times of war. World War II, as we know, was won by the manufacturing prowess of the US, the ability to really churn out all types of the equipment that was needed for the war. And now we're seeing really this ability of Israel to grow as a manufacturing and as an export powerhouse in the region, based on really this gold mine that we found in the Mediterranean Sea, the natural gas, which really does tremendously boost the economy when you have this type of an influx coming into what was not a small economy to start with, but obviously it gives that additional boost that every economy enjoys as a part of that growth that we're expecting to see.
And you mentioned obviously the US there. The American company Chevron will play a role in this. How will the different partners work together to realise the value out of this deal?
Well, so I think that part of the strength of this entire venture has been the fact that it's not only an Israeli venture, but it's a joint venture with American companies. That really does open not a small amount of doors. It's huge American companies that trade around the world. And so it really does cut out much of the friction that there could possibly be. It's not Egypt suddenly buying just from Israel. There's an American partnership as well in this whole event. And that, I think, is part of the strategy from the start of bringing in the larger US companies to be partners in the development of the gas fields, and to be partners also in the sale of the gas fields, ensuring that they bring along their stability to the region, which would otherwise possibly be a little bit more chaotic.
Now, Maurice, I don't want to in any way overstate the value of optics. We know during the conflict there's been very real suffering on both sides. But is there something about the positive nature of this deal? You know, you spoke about prosperity, that it somehow provides another focus, an alternative focus, a way of garnering energy, expertise, partners around something that is just much more positive, frankly.
I absolutely right. I think what we're trying to create at the moment, when I say we, I mean the more reasonable partnerships in the areas that aren't the terrorists. We're trying to create an environment of general prosperity for our populations, allowing everyone to cut aside that the Islamic fundamentalist side and allow our populations to enjoy the fruits of the gas fields, the fruits of production, the fruits of being able to work in an environment that is secure, that guarantees a future for our children, rather than just focusing on our differences and conflicts. We have far more in common with the region, and we have far more to do working together as a unit in the region, and then we have of the things that divide us. And so really the optics, as you say, of this deal are very, very clear. Egypt is saying we are still going to deal with Israel. Israel is saying we have partners in the region that we're looking to develop our relationships with them. This morning, I don't know if you noticed, there was a report on Israeli television saying that there's even a potential similar gas deal with Syria. We are now being able to really develop this area into a new prosperous enterprise, free of the Iranian possibly stranglehold on the area. And there are all types of developing opportunities which really could turn this area into what it should be, and it could be a beautiful area where all of the different countries cooperate together instead of looking for division and conflict.
Do you think it also has a positive effect the other way, Maurice, in that one of the things that big commercial investors sometimes, often get very nervous about is the threat of conflict and disruption. So in order to ensure that those commercial partnerships endure, there's almost an extra impetus to make sure that stability and security is a lasting one.
You're absolutely right as well. And the idea of using stability and economics and prosperity in order to promote peace isn't something new. It's something that when you look back, however controversial it was, and maybe I would have suggested presenting it a different way, but when President Trump presented his idea, his vision for the Gaza Strip being really the Singapore of the Middle East, a Riviera of hotels and everything, he wasn't simply presenting an idea of let's come and conquer. He was presenting an idea of prosperity for the Gazan population, that they so deserve it. They deserve to live in an area that isn't under the control of terrorists. And what we're trying to, I think, build in this area is this idea of what President Trump called back already in 2020, peace for prosperity. That's what we can do when we have peace. We can all gain from this situation, and every country has what there is to gain. Egypt gets cheaper gas, Israel gets income, everyone enjoys the prosperity that comes along with these types of deals, employment opportunities, manufacturing opportunities. There is really a tremendous spectrum of things that can be done as long as we're willing to put aside almost those nationalistic, diversive drives and say we're all here together, no one's going anywhere, so let's live the most prosperous lives that we can, everyone enjoying that effort all together.
Of course, we don't know precisely how much in the way of natural resources is going to be found in the future, and all sorts of exploratory work needs to be done in order to nail that down. But is there a vision that you have for Israel as a regional energy power? I mean, potentially how far could this go?
Well, so really the Leviathan find was some gross, I think it was somewhere in the region of 31 trillion cubic meters, but with less ability for production maybe. But alongside Leviathan, there's also the Tamar gas field, which was also a substantial gas field. If you remember, just before the war, about 9 months before the war started, there was a deal also between Israel and Lebanon, readjusting our exclusive economic zones. And there's potentially another oil field just to the north of Israel as well. So really, there are these different fields that are coming up. There are more explorations going on. And there is a tremendous potential for additional finds already in the pipeline. And this could be something which could be used by everyone. I know that Cyprus also has their gas exploration efforts in their economic zones, and everyone really is trying to get to maximization of those natural resources. They change a lot of their and really of everything that's going on here. If you put Qatar, that even with its LNG still has a long distance to go before it can get to the Mediterranean to then provide gas to Europe, when you have these gas finds in the Mediterranean Sea and the ability of Israel and possibly other partners, other countries to then directly export that gas straight to Europe, not only staying in the Middle East, I think that really is very much of a game changer, and it could potentially bring a true geopolitical change to this area of the eastern side, of the Mediterranean Sea, coming in and being a provider of gas for Europe rather than it coming from the further eastern side and the Arabian Peninsula.
Morris, very good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us from Jerusalem.
Thank you very much for having me.
After the break, we check in with our correspondents around the world for the very latest developments in their regions. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime. Now let's go to Washington. In a rare evening address from the White House, US President Donald Trump boasted on Wednesday of his accomplishments and blamed his Democratic predecessor for soaring consumer prices as his party braces for a tough midterm election next year. Our correspondent Ube Shabanda has more now on Donald Trump's speech.
In a major nationwide address, President Donald Trump laid out in detail his administration's accomplishments in improving the American economy, with a big focus on the topic of affordability. From gas prices to groceries, the president announced new data that showed a sharp decrease in cost for everyday goods. The president credited his new tariff policies and a crackdown on illegal migration in enhancing affordability for everyday American families. President Trump also highlighted massive tax cuts that are forthcoming following the passage of his signature congressional agenda in the Big Beautiful Bill that Congress recently passed by a significant majority. Trump announced that many families will be saving between $11,000 and $20,000 a year in tax refunds. And a big Christmas gift to American men and women in uniform announced by the president on Wednesday evening to the tune of $1,776 for over 1.45 million military service members who will receive the cash just in time for the Christmas holiday. Trump announced what he termed a warrior dividend in recognition of America's founding in 1776, with the United States set to celebrate its 250th birthday next year. The president's move signals an attempt to connect with working-class families as the administration tackles an affordability problem that has been on the minds of millions of American families. In addition, Trump announced a new plan to reduce healthcare costs by a wide margin. The president said that Americans will, quote, get much better healthcare at much lower prices. The only loser, according to the president, will be the insurance companies, who Trump says have been profiting at the expense of families who have seen their healthcare insurance costs exponentially skyrocket in the past decade. Trump said that he negotiated directly with pharmaceutical drug companies and foreign nations, which the president said were taking advantage of our country for many decades, with the president saying that his negotiations succeeded in forcing those pharmaceutical drug companies to slash prices on badly needed drugs by as much as 500%. So a number of major announcements made by the president with a focus on the economy and ensuring that Americans have more money in their pockets as the Christmas holiday approaches. I'm Ube Shabander, A News, Washington.
Moving to Europe now, Anita Sharma has more on what we can expect as an outcome from this critical EU summit.
Welcome to This Day in Europe as leaders arrive in Brussels to decide how to keep Ukraine financed in the years to come. 3 front options are on the table with no easy consensus in sight. At the heart of the summit is a proposed reparations loan that would let the Commission borrow against immobilized Russian central bank assets held by Euroclear in Belgium, channeling tens of billions of euros to Kyiv, something that would only require a qualified majority. Kyiv would only repay the loan if Russia paid war reparations for the destruction it caused. The EU would then reimburse Euroclear. Now, for countries opposed to this, including Belgium, Italy, and Bulgaria, a second option entails a joint Eurobond-like borrowing scheme guaranteed by unused headroom in the EU budget. That route spreads risk across the bloc, but requires unanimity, an unlikely outcome. A last resort scenario floated in the European Parliament, a coalition of the willing of Euro-Ukraine hardliners that would go ahead with a bespoke financing arrangement outside the full EU framework if the summit collapses without a deal. Last night, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged the EU to send Russia a clear signal that continuing the war is pointless. Meantime, at yesterday's annual Defense Ministry gathering in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin called European politicians little pigs and warned that Russia would achieve its territorial goals in Ukraine through diplomacy or military force. Putin also reiterated that the use of Russian state assets to fund Ukraine amounts to theft and would be met with retaliation. Let's see what unprecedented option the bloc chooses to secure long-term funding for Ukraine. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
News from Tehran now. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi wrapped up a 3-day official visit to Belarus and Russia, during which he held high-level talks and signed cooperation agreements with his Belarusian and Russian counterparts in Minsk and in Moscow. Turad Shirililo has more.
Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi arrived in capital Tehran from Moscow on Wednesday evening after paying an official 3-day visit to Belarus and Russia. In Minsk, he met with his Belarusian counterpart Maxim Ryzhenko, President and Secretary of State National Security Council. At the conclusion of the visit to Belarus, which according to official sources focused on bilateral ties, he told reporters that invitation of Iran's Secretary of National Supreme Security Council was submitted to his Belarusian counterpart. It was also agreed that Minister of Transportation of Belarus will visit Tehran in the near future to discuss international transit cooperation. Foreign ministers of Iran and Belarus signed 3 documents on strengthening the role of international law in international relations, on strategic principles for countering unilateral coercive actions, and on cooperation of the 2 foreign ministries for 2026 to 2030. During the second leg of his visit, Araghchi met with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, lawmakers of the State Duma, as well as scholars and thinkers in Moscow. Araghchi and Lavrov signed a cooperation document based on the Iran-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty, specifying the program of consultations between their foreign ministries for the years 2026 to 2028. The Iran-Russia Strategic Treaty, which entered into force in October 2025, is valid for 25 years. In a joint press conference with Russian Foreign Minister, he said that Iran has not sent any message on resumption of nuclear negotiations with the United States. In Tehran, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian also said on Wednesday that he will not accept U.S. conditions for renewed talks as long as Washington is laying down demands which he termed bullying and humiliating. Turad Shirililo, Tehran, A News.
A closer look now at the Central Asia cooperation with Japan. Kazakhstan and Japan are set to deepen economic ties during President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's official visit to Tokyo, where a series of multi-billion-dollar agreements is expected to be signed. Our correspondent Fariza Kalamazina has the details.
Kazakhstan and Japan are moving to deepen their economic partnership during President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's official visit to Tokyo. A package of commercial agreements totaling more than $3.7 billion is expected to be signed. The package includes over 40 documents covering energy, renewable energy, digitalization, mining and transport. President Tokayev is also scheduled to meet representatives of major Japanese companies, underscoring the business-focused nature of the visit. This is President Tokayev's first official visit to Japan, and it began with a meeting with Emperor Naruhito, setting the political context of the trip. According to experts, Japan views Kazakhstan not only as a market but as a strategic partner in Eurasia. Tokyo is seeking stable access to uranium and other critical minerals. Kazakhstan holds a significant share of the global uranium market and is seen as a key partner as Japan moves to restart its nuclear energy sector. Rare earth metals are also part of this agenda, helping Japan reduce dependence on Chinese suppliers in sensitive industries. Economic ties reflect this trend. Trade turnover reached $1.8 billion last year, while foreign direct investment from Japan exceeded $468 million. The Japan Bank for International Cooperation has also signaled readiness to invest an additional $200 million in energy, infrastructure, food processing, and engineering projects. The visit continues on Friday in an expanded regional format with discussions expected alongside other Central Asian leaders at the Central Asia-Japan Summit. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Afghanistan and Kyrgyzstan have taken major steps to expand regional trade and economic cooperation. Both countries have signed commercial agreements worth $157 million as both countries move to strengthen private sector ties. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis reports now from Kabul.
A business connectivity conference between the private sectors of Afghanistan and Kyrgyzstan was held in Kabul. The event was organized by the Afghanistan Chamber of Commerce and Investment and brought together senior officials and business leaders from both countries. The Minister of Industry and Commerce of Afghanistan, Nuruddin Azizi, said the main purpose of the conference was to identify investment opportunities, evaluate existing challenges, and take practical steps to strengthen economic cooperation. During the event, Azizi announced the official launch of a Kyrgyz trade house in Kabul, adding that Afghanistan is also planning to open its own trade house in Bishkek in the near future. Meanwhile, Kyrgyzstan's Minister of Economy and Trade highlighted his country's interest in expanding trade with Afghanistan. He said that the newly launched trade house will help establish direct contacts between companies, facilitate transit of goods, and host trade meetings. At the conference, contracts worth $157 million were signed between 10 companies, covering sectors such as cement, fresh fruits and vegetables, pharmaceuticals, transit, telecommunications, and security equipment. The head of the Afghanistan Chamber of Commerce and Investment said the country offers strong investment opportunities and emphasized the Chamber's commitment to long-term and sustainable cooperation between the private sectors of both nations. This visit comes at a time when trade between Kabul and Islamabad has been suspended for more than 2 months, a situation that has opened new avenues for Afghanistan's trade and increased interest from Central Asian countries. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Well, let's go to China now. And as Caracas faces renewed US pressure, Chinese and Venezuelan leaders continue high-level talks. China reaffirmed its support for Venezuela's sovereignty and opposition to unilateral sanctions. A News' Manor Makdoum has more now from Beijing.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi held a phone conversation with Venezuelan Foreign Affairs Minister Ivan Gil, continuing high-level engagement as Caracas faces renewed pressure from the United States. The exchange comes against a backdrop of tensions between Caracas and Washington and heightened U.S. scrutiny of China's growing footprint in Latin America. During the call, Wang said that China attaches importance to its comprehensive strategic partnership with Venezuela and is willing to work with Caracas to implement the important consensus reached by the two heads of state. He reiterated China's support for Venezuela in safeguarding its sovereignty, national dignity, and right to independent development. while stressing Beijing's opposition to unilateral sanctions and what it views as external interference, a position that implicitly contrasts with U.S. policy toward the Maduro government. Gill also briefed Wang on Venezuela's domestic situation and recent interactions with the United States, expressing appreciation for China's consistent diplomatic and political backing. He said Venezuela values China as a reliable partner amid external pressure and is ready to deepen cooperation in areas including energy, trade, and multilateral coordination, while strengthening joint positions on international issues in response to what both sides described as an increasingly polarized global situation. Anam Akhtar, A News, Beijing.
Back in Europe, hundreds of farmers drove tractors into Brussels, blocking roads and setting containers on fire as EU leaders held a summit to discuss trade and agricultural policy. Well, farmers say the agricultural sector has been in crisis for years and accuse the EU of undermining their livelihoods through trade deals such as the Mercosur and potential cuts to the common agricultural policy budget. Police used water cannons to disperse protesters who set fires and launched fireworks near the European Council building. The demonstration adds pressure on EU leaders as they consider budget priorities and trade agreements that farmers fear will increase competition and drive down prices. Opposition lawmakers clashed with police in Albania's parliament, disrupting a session over corruption allegations against Deputy Prime Minister Belinda Baluku. Members of the Democratic Party lit black flares, threw water at the speaker and occupied ministers' seats, prompting police to intervene and clear the podium. Well, the unrest follows a request by the Special Prosecution Office to lift Baluku's immunity over alleged corruption tied to major infrastructure projects. Parliament is due to vote on the request on Friday. Tough new hate speech laws are set to be announced across Australia following the deadly attack at Sydney's Bondi Beach, which left 15 people dead on Sunday. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says new legislation will make it easier to prosecute those promoting hatred and increase penalties for extremist activity. His government faces growing pressure over rising anti-Semitism. The move follows the country's deadliest mass shooting in almost 30 years.
The Attorney-General and Minister for Home Affairs will develop a package of legislative reforms to crack down on those who spread hate, division and radicalisation. The Minister for Home Affairs will also have new powers to cancel or reject visas for those who spread hate and division in this country or would do so if they were allowed to come here.
Turning now to the news of Hollywood director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Reiner, who were both found dead on Sunday. Their son, Nick Reiner, was arrested on suspicion of killing his parents and appears in court on Wednesday morning in Los Angeles. Well, newly released video footage of his arrest shows him walking into a petrol station in LA on Sunday and then walking across a street as police confronted and arrested the 32-year-old. He has been charged with 2 counts of murder. The family have spoken publicly about Nick's history of battling addiction. In Turkey's city of Konya, a centuries-old ritual is drawing visitors from around the world. Whirling dervishes are marking the anniversary of the death of the Sufi poet Rumi, not as a moment of mourning, but of spiritual reunion.
In Konya, silence speaks before the music begins. White robes glide across the floor, black cloaks fall away, and a centuries-old ritual comes to life. This is Sebi Arus, not a mourning, but a reunion. The anniversary of the death of Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, the Sufi poet who taught that death is not an end, but a return.
Rumi expressed his reunion with God as being reunited with his beloved, like a wedding night. And even when his doctor said, "May God grant you healing, get back on your feet soon," while he was in his hospital bed, he said, "Enough is enough. My duty in this prison called the world is over. Let me go to my beloved." And he was reunited with his beloved on December 17th in the afternoon.
The spinning bodies follow a language older than words. Hands speak, one raised to the sky, one turned toward the earth.
His left hand points downwards, his right hand, the prayer hand, upwards, and the fingers of his left hand open. These point to an attitude of, whatever comes from God, we do not keep it for ourselves. We distribute it to the whole world.
But the ritual begins long before the spin. In quiet workshops, devotion is stitched, pressed, and shaped by hand.
The tenure, the white garment, the long white robe symbolizes purity, cleanliness, and also the burial shroud because it constantly reminds the dervish of death. The black cloak we wear over it symbolizes the earth of the nafs.
Even the headwear carries meaning shaped slowly, patiently as an act of worship.
Since Sikhs, dervishes' headwear are the tombstones of their nafs, meaning self in Arabic, and sometimes translated as ego or soul, worship is taken into consideration here. And we too do clean and good work to act in a line with the worship.
Each year, Konya draws seekers from across the world, drawn not by spectacle, but by meaning.
This is the time where it's feel like a celebration. It feels like coming near to Him, and it's like time where my heart get cleans, my heart get strength, and my heart get a lot of light here.
To the Middle East now, where severe storms have caused deaths and damage across the Gaza Strip. Thousands of displaced families are struggling after their tents were destroyed. Streets have been flooded and hospitals say they're facing major disruptions, raising urgent calls for international assistance.
Heavy rain and severe storms have been hitting Gaza this winter. A Palestinian man was killed and several others injured after a residential building partially collapsed on Tuesday. That's according to the International Civil Defense Organization, which provides emergency management in human-made and natural disasters. Thousands of tents used by displaced families have been flooded and destroyed, while operations at the Al-Shifa hospital have been disrupted. Authorities are also warning that thousands of homes partially ruined in previous Israeli strikes are now at risk of collapse. Local officials also highlighted the widespread destruction of infrastructure, flooded streets, and overflowing sewage, calling for urgent international assistance, including temporary housing and repair of essential services. Last week, a winter storm in Gaza claimed at least 14 lives. More than 53,000 tents were damaged by floods or destroyed by strong winds, while 13 buildings also collapsed. The International Civil Defense Organization says nearly 250,000 families remain in fragile displacement camps, facing cold and flood risks, while access to humanitarian aid continues to be heavily restricted despite the ceasefire in October. The United Nations and aid groups warn that relief efforts could fail unless Israel lifts obstacles, including a vague and politicized registration process for international aid organizations. Israel says it is complying with the ceasefire agreement.
Well, that does bring us to the end of Prime Time. Please do check out anews.tv for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here, thanks for watching.